in the last several months and years to speak, there's been a billion different ways of saying phishing or smishing or you name it. And so we really want to get that coverage as we were talking about earlier and have those technical people and non-technical people, and I think ultimately a large focus on the remote and workforce and those who are predominantly using email as communication and working daily tasks inside of it. Add that coverage to the security awareness training program and have a keen idea of what tools are being used and some of the vectors that can be simulated. And so if you're getting a random email asking you to log into vendor A and you know that you don't use vendor A, you use vendor B, escalate it to the department that's going to handle the security training on that so that they can include it in the daily tasks.
It is still October, which means that it's still Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And that means everybody out there in MSP land, in MSP world, are anxiously, excitedly trying to learn how to become better, more secure, and also how to train their customers on how to become more secure, more resilient, and all of that. And we have a great episode today where we are going to be taking, actually, this is going to be a year-long extravaganza and campaign that Chris Viau, myself from MSP Alliance are going to be taking all of you through a variety of different MSP-specific controls that will make you a better, more secure MSP. And we're going to give you practical examples on how to implement these controls in a normal, everyday MSP practice environment. And this really has never been done before, right? People talk about different frameworks. They talk about becoming compliant as an abstract theory. We're going to actually put this into practice for you and give you real solid examples. And so I'm really excited about this. And thanks, Chris, for taking time out of your busy schedule, certifying and auditing MSPs all over the planet to take us through this journey.
It's a pleasure to be back, Charles.
All right. So we obviously want to keep this very compressed for each episode. And this episode, I think, could best be described as internal MSP employee training. Now, I would say many MSPs, when they think about user awareness training, they think about a service that they sell to customers, which is very valid and very important. But we're talking about internal training. Could you briefly just describe why that matters? Why is it important?
Yes. So it's important because we in the compliance world do a really good job of documenting our security and our policies. And in the real world, what we want to do is build a bridge between the policies and the standards, and then connect those policies and standards to daily tasks that we're doing on a daily basis.
It's so easy to understand when you say it that way. I wonder why more people don't love compliance. It's so simple. It's so elegant, right? Practical. I think you talked about bridging a gap. That to me says practicality, pragmatic, and that's why I love about what we're doing and what CyberVerify is all about. So let's talk about employee training. A fair number of MSPs, when they hear that term, they think about certification tracks, like making sure they get their help desk technicians, their NOC technicians, A+ certified, or some CompTIA or Microsoft certification, which are important. We're not talking about that. True, or are we talking about that?
I think we're talking about both the professional certifications that you would gain as an analyst or a technician or a salesperson in those roles, demonstrating proficiency with the technical components of what we do. But also we are talking about standing up or leveraging a methodical training approach that's role-based so that each employee gets the user awareness training catered to the information that they have access to.
So If we were to say, because I would imagine the fair number of MSP organizations probably place technical certification training on those technical users. What about the rest of the company? Salespeople, non-technical people. Maybe they're in marketing. Maybe they're in finance. Maybe they are in account management, right? Even for small organizations, there's a fair number of non-technical people. They should also come under some sort of employee training and user awareness. Should they not?
I believe they should, yes.
And what would be a reason for doing that where previously MSPs would have, let's say, mainly focused on the technical service people?
The non-technical employees that MSPs are going to want to bring through their training are just as important as the technical employees when it comes to adherence to those policies and those standards that we were talking about previously. And so, granted, you may not want your sales personnel to be going through the fundamentals of server hardening when it comes to training, but you do want to spin them up and educate them on MSP specific things like what are the service providers that we're using? What are the data centers that we're using? Where that data is located so that they know what to be aware of when things like social engineering attacks and phishing attempts come their way, which they will inevitably come their way in 2025. So we're really just hardening that front line of defense.
I never really thought about that. That's a really good. So a non-technical person, let's say in this scenario, sales, them being aware that you use a particular vendor set would be really helpful because then they can be aware of a phishing attack or a social engineering attack leveraging a vendor they don't have would be an immediate tell of, all right, this is probably not legitimate, right? Because we don't use that vendor.
That's right. Yeah, exactly, Charles. And I think what we've seen in the recent years and seems to be increasing at this point, which is the attempts and attacks towards customer data, internal data, data breaches are caused by human error. And most of the metrics I'm seeing are 60% and greater caused by human error. So we need to be training humans on how to interact with the information and protect it.
Okay. So I think that that's probably a very accurate statistic. E-learning platforms, products, what would be a recommended tool that you think an MSP ought to be using? What are we recommending for MSPs seeking certification like MSP Verify? What would we say to them when asked, all right, how do I stand up an employee training model within my MSP business?
It's a good question because I want to keep it sort of vendor agnostic in that sense. But I think that we can start with some sort of principles first, which is the first principle is coverage. And we want to have accurate coverage of the entire organization. Like you said previously, we're not just training technical people, we're training technical and non-technical. The best use case for making sure that happens, short of having a dedicated compliance or a dedicated security information officer, would be a LMS style learning system where you can automate that process so that it occurs annually, biannually, quarterly even, and then making sure that the deployment of that LMS is synchronized with the strategic initiative.
So we are staying vendor agnostic, which is true to our mission statement. There are many well-known platforms out there. We don't have to say their name, but they do exist. I'm assuming you're recommending one of those platforms where an MSP, separate from whether they're selling it as a service to a customer, that the MSP should adopt one of those security awareness training platforms, leverage that and deploy that across the entirety of their company, and that would start the process towards satisfying certainly a number of our requirements in our framework for MSP Verify, but many other frameworks, globally accepted cyber frameworks. True. All they need to do is just stand it up, just have it operating. Any other modifications or recommendations on how they use the platform?
A lot of those out of the box solutions are going to have configurations that you can just enter things like my organization is structured like this, and so I need to break up my training in this capacity, or they get a solution that is standardized across the board and everybody goes through the same sequence, whether it be once a year or as needed, especially pending any incidents in the middle of a year, in the middle of a period of compliance, as we like to say. You would want to administer retraining. And then I think also that's one of the things we want to discuss is what does it look like post incident when you've gone through that training. And so I'm sure we've got the whole year to breach into incident response and some of those other concepts. But ultimately, we want to use that out of the box solution and break it up by principle of least privilege, account types, non-technical, technical, maybe add a third tier in there for the executive level because they're generally privy to more sensitive information and will need a greater level of access pending their workflow.
So you're saying that people like you and I might actually be more targeted, more valuable to the bad actors out there, and therefore we as much as you and I think we know, we ought to stay sharp and educated and informed by going through these types of ongoing educational awareness training, just like everybody else.
Yes, sir. I'm not directly saying that we have privileged accounts, but those are the guys that, generally speaking, could do the most damage had the infiltration take place.
I bring that up because I think the what I'm hearing is that the entire MSP organization should treat this very seriously and not isolate or treat any one person or department or group as less less important and therefore less needing of this type of thing. I think it does. I interpret it as everybody has a equal responsibility and an equal need to receive this type of a training, which brings my follow-up question. You're not recommending like just a once a year, you have a meeting for 30 minutes and you talk about something. This is ongoing and rather repeated throughout the year. Is that true?
I think that it is true in the sense of the days of once a year getting together, making sure that we're checking the boxes are sort of all but gone at this point. So gamification could actually play a role here in that system where rather than doing it all in one day or doing it once a year, you break up the training administered through an automated tool or training personnel to bite-sized portions throughout the year. And so we've seen those old slogans, loose lips, sink ships, right? Well, same concept about security awareness training and information security training, which is make it part of the company culture and reinforce it on a weekly, monthly basis, titrate it into your daily tasks.
Great advice. Let's get specific here. Let's talk about phishing campaigns and phishing simulations. The tactics that the bad actors use, whether it's seek business email compromise, attempting to, extract money by creating fake invoices and sending them to the accounting department and, trying to do that type of thing. There's so many different types of phishing attacks and attack vectors. Maybe you want to give us some best practices around phishing simulations and training as an example of a larger, user awareness training campaign.
Yes, I think that we want to group phishing into the security personnel's role, likely into the vulnerability assessments and even sometimes penetration testing. And part of that sequence, because the attempt with a phishing is to gain access, to gain information into a system and to lure you in, just like the word sounds. And I know that in the last several months and years to speak, there's been a billion different ways of saying phishing or smishing or you name it. And so we really want to get that coverage as we were talking about earlier and have those technical people and non-technical people and think ultimately a large focus on the remote workforce and those who are predominantly using email as communication and working daily tasks inside of it, add that coverage to the security awareness training program and have a keen idea of what tools are being used and some of the vectors that can be simulated. And so if you're getting a random email asking you to log into vendor A and you know that you don't use vendor A, you use vendor B, escalate it to the department that's going to handle the security training on that so that they can include it in the daily tasks.
That's a really good point, which is there's understanding it's a threat, and there's what probably all of us have instinctively probably thought about doing or actually have done, which is you hit delete and you don't tell anybody about it. You're actually there's a value, seems like, in telling people and in forwarding or calling someone and say, hey, look, I got a suspicious email. What should I do with it? I'm not clicking on it, but this doesn't seem right. And getting involved in making other people aware. That seems to be a very big takeaway or outcome from this.
Yes, sir. I agree. Yeah, leverage the feature inside of your Exchange or your Outlook or whatever your email client is. If you're getting suspicious emails or you're getting threats through attempts to gain access to your systems in a phishing way, flag it for review. And if you've got even deeper tools using scanning and SIM tools, then alert them so that they can add that to the watch list and, potentially help somebody down the line.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, your recommendation, our recommendation is that this should be an ongoing endeavor, an ongoing campaign that doesn't just stop. It's running throughout the year because you want to make sure that people remain vigilant. I'm assuming you want to train new people who come into the organization or have new responsibilities, and the tactics change, right? So there's a reason to just keep this going, and it's just like exercise, right? You're never going to stop it unless you go out of shape, right? If you want to stay in shape, you got to keep putting the effort in.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. You want to continue to keep that gapless coverage, as we've talked about before.
When it comes to evidence, right? So there's we our world in MSP Verify, when we're dealing with an MSP organization seeking certification, there are what are you doing, and then there is prove what you are doing, prove what you said you were doing. The proof for these types of campaigns is what? Just the presence of the product that you're using. This a snapshot of their settings. So, what's something that the MSPs should take away from this in terms of being prepared to show this to a certification body like us?
Yes. So some of the tools will offer grading and certificates of completion. And so a really good onboarding procedure would be to provide evidence of a onboarding document or an onboarding ticket that calls out certain functions of the security awareness training or information security training, or just user acceptance training more broadly inside of the ticket, so that piece of training can be completed, and then you would provide certificates that actually took place. And so that's a really good way of bringing new customers, new onboarding, new employees into the environment, and then on those recertifications or those reoccurring training tasks, just have a snapshot of the screen of the tool that's being used. Or if you have a training folder and somebody's put together a security awareness training program, absent one of these LMS or out of the box solutions, something that's concise enough that we can see that it's in place, it's operating, and then sufficient evidence that it's actually being applied and adhered to by the employees or the target audience.
That's really important. So I know we spend on a different part of our MSP framework a lot of time on user onboarding, right? MSP user onboarding. That is to say, an employee of the MSP, not a customer. It sounds like this would be baked into that user onboarding to prove that new users into the company, the MSP company, are being subjected to ongoing user awareness training and simulations.
Yes.
That, yeah, okay. That if you're not
It's
doing it, then you should be, obviously.
Well, I was just recalling the sort of influx in activity that we've seen over the last year, calendar year, of the requests from independent auditors actually looking to see security training taking place inside of that process. Oftentimes I think it's easier to do it right up front, and that way it doesn't get missed, or if you don't have that deployment and automation in place for a yearly task, then doing it right in the beginning there, you can certainly evidence that and demonstrate it.
Hypothetical. It may not be hypothetical in your day to day, but you may have come across this in the past. If I'm an MSP and I've never been certified, but I'm going through and I'm getting my MSP verify either this year or I want to do it next year in 2026, and I've never had internal user awareness training program before. I but I'm going to do it now moving forward with all my new hires, but I've got this backlog of existing employees, and let's say I'm going to go out to market. I'm going to buy a cybersecurity, training awareness platform. What would be your recommendation for bringing those types of MSP employees into the fold and evidencing it so that they get credit for it when the auditors eventually ask that question that you just brought up?
Bringing it back to those MSP tools, the MSP specifics that we use, right? We're using that big fleet of external service providers that generally are plug and play with one another if you are sequencing the correct ones. And so I would recommend getting an LMS that might embed directly into the ticketing platform or directly into your HR platform so that you can implement some of the automation into that process. And so you're not necessarily going and cherry picking which employees to have go through the training, but instead provide the whole list up front and then allow some of those automation tools to take place. And that's, as somebody who's coming into the certification pipeline and is wanting to hit that maturity mark and bring it to the next level, let's say start leveraging some of the advanced and plug and play ability with the external service providers.
That's good advice. Is there do the MSPs that we work with, do they find it easy to be able to deliver some of the adjunct training and guidance for employees that maybe missed a phishing simulation attack and they clicked on a link that they shouldn't have? And maybe the awareness training platform gives some perfunctory advice of, hey, this is why you made a mistake, this is what you should have been looking for. Do we see the MSPs stepping up and saying, hey, look, we can actually do some more training for everybody around this because this is obviously an issue? Are they getting that comfort level, do you think? And just your thoughts on that.
I think that those who've been doing it for a while are demonstrating that, and those who are coming into the fold, or maybe are in they're sort of in their sophomore state of demonstrating certification and compliance. The security awareness requirements relatively new with respect to the age of the expertise in the UC, the domains from CyberVerify. And so I would continue to look for an adoption rate of tracking metrics and making sure that those tools that are simulating phishing campaigns or actually going out and doing a phishing campaign, you're doing follow-ups and you document that. And ultimately, in the case of having to evidence it or action it.
Yeah. Okay. So just to kind of summarize at this point, we've talked about user awareness training for internal MSP organizations. You can sell it, you can monetize it. That's a whole separate issue, right? And you should be doing those things. We're just talking about if you're going to go as an MSP organization and get certified, you're going to get an MSP Verify report, you're going to get a SOC 2, you're going to get an ISO, you're going to get a CMMC, aligned with any of the globally accepted frameworks. Chris, you said is going to be directly applicable to them. They're going to need to show it. How do they show it and how do they document it? and I'm specifically asking like policies because I'm assuming this is going to someone is going to ask them not just are you doing it, but show me where it's documented. What would that look like and where would that show up typically?
Well, that's a good question. You mentioned ISO, and so without going down that rabbit hole, but I think it's important to take into perspective some of those other frameworks, chiefly ISO and high trust, and it's the CMMC as it makes its way to the compliance front. Those information security policies, the employee help desk policy, the employee handbook. These policies should define who needs security awareness training and to what depth they need it, technically or non technical, right? So a non technical person may not, like we talked about earlier, get fundamentals of hardening servers. But they would still receive some of the phishing awareness, the non technical aspects of social engineering attacks and password protection. And so those are going to depend on the verticals you're serving, whether you're inside of a government vertical or you're hosting platforms and systems that have PII or FCI or even CUI, right? And so um, that sensitive information is going to determine who gets the training, and you'll want to document those and those big policies previously mentioned.
How high up does the monitoring of these internal MSP user awareness training campaigns and efforts, how high up in the MSP organization reporting should that reporting go? Like, is this at a IT director level? Does it go all the way up to the C suites? What's your recommendation? What's our recommendation? As a standards body.
Strategic initiative defines who gets what notifications, right? And so if it's just your line manager that's doing the training and administering that training, and you've got an employee who didn't do it or you missed it, right? Then that should be handled, I think, at the department level. But when we're talking about threat landscapes and the overarching security picture of the organization, that should go as far as the top level of governance.
Even if it's just giving them a report for, hey, like the last quarter we did this in our security awareness training, these people, performed this. I mean, really what you're saying is just making it transparent to the upper levels of management and ownership so that they understand what's happening across the company. And there's no, I didn't know that was happening moments is really what we're talking about, right?
That's right. Yes, sir.
Any other so we talked about a policy, so there should be in whatever policy that you use, and I'm assuming there isn't a requirement that a user awareness training description show up in a particular policy. It just needs to be in some policy. Is that correct or not correct?
It should be defined and ultimately in whatever policy is governing the level of access based on job role. That could be the access control policy or the employee handbook or the information security policy.
Okay. So depending on your company, depending on what you do, depending on the size, probably, but it may show up in one or multiple places and it may be different. So I guess the outcome is the MSP shouldn't say, oh, it automatically has to be in this document called this. It just has to be set forth according to how you plan to run it. And then that's how you are running it. And that's how you're monitoring it.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have anything to show? I know you had some visuals maybe to describe and show to the audience out there watching this, what we look for, what we ask MSPs who are going through Cyber Verify to achieve any number of different, framework certification audit outcomes, kind of what they would practically be asked to show and answer because, I think a lot of people just, have a curiosity of, what does it look like? Well, what would we be required to do around training?
Absolutely. I do. Yes. I've got some evidence here of my just recently completed security awareness training. And so I know it's time to to go into my compliance software, and it's time to upload evidence so that it can be tested. And so I, just log into my Cyber Verify instance here and call out that security awareness training. And so when I go in there, I see that you've been assigned, I've been assigned to it. So we know we both need to eventually get in there and upload our required documentation. And so when I'm looking through what's being asked of me, which is are my employees and me participating in security awareness training at least annually? And so I have answered that question, yes, but forgot to attach my evidence. And so I've been asked to upload that evidence inside of the platform. And I just want to reiterate that my answer or my description that verifies this control is in place is that we're using an LMS designed to deliver the security awareness training in modules, and that's done monthly. And so I'll go in there and provide evidence of that. And so I can just easily drop that in from my desktop, right, and try to hit it, slot there, attachment, and that's as easy as that particular requirement is completed. So I'll submit that in and just wait for the next module to be released next month. And then I go in and complete that as well. And that's done off screen.
And for those people out there wondering what's happening behind the scenes, so well, a couple things. Number one, the platform, the Cyber Verify platform, actually helps write the controls for you based off of those sequence of questions and how you respond, and it's going to be different for every MSP, which is the elegance and the power of the Cyber Verify platform, that it takes the great variety of MSPs on the planet and how they uniquely operate, but it does boil it down and give some very specific, kind of, I don't call it rigid, but I mean it has a form to it, right? I mean, every MSP, if you're in Australia or you're in Texas, when it comes to user training, you're going to be asked, how are you doing it? Describe it, show us the evidence, and then the system is going to write the control, and then it's going to test it, and then so that, if you were wondering out there, that's what the system is doing in the background.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's another piece to that too, which is you've done your own security awareness training, and maybe you sell that security awareness training to the clients and to the customers. And so they're interested in receiving that. And so the platform is set up in such a way where you can administer the assessment of the customer environment with respect to your internal compliance. And so what we have here is a customer security awareness training module. And so we've already begun this one and started to access what does role-based training look like inside of an organization. And we're asking your customer here, you're administering this, to gain an understanding of what does their security awareness training look like inside of their ecosystem, in case you need to either step in and provide a service that they're lacking so that they can achieve the compliance levels that they desire, or B, you can get an understanding of how to efficiently deliver those solutions to them, plugging into the way that they operate. And so we're just talking about some of those concepts we talked about earlier, which is executives may have an elevated level of access to sensitive systems and data. And so we would have the client go through this questionnaire, or you go through it with them and say, hey, yeah, we are doing this, or no, we're not doing this, or even you guys do this for me, or at least we think you do this for us. And so
that's a great example, Chris, right there, of understanding how both sides, MSP and customer, view certain things. Like how there could be I've seen it happen, I think you've seen it happen probably, where the MSP says, we don't sell you, cybersecurity awareness training. and the customer says, "Oh, I think I'm doing that," and they want to take credit for it, and they want to take credit for it on behalf of their MSP, and it ends up, I'll say maybe innocently, being wrong. It's an incorrect, it's a non-factual statement. And yet there's a big gap sometimes between that and, oh, I thought my MSP was backing up my information. Turns out they weren't. You're not buying backup as a service from your MSP. But this is a really good way to kind of get to the truth of the matter and really figure out, what does my customer think they're getting from me versus what am I actually delivering to them? I think it's nice.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's do it yourself internally as an MSP. It's expected of you. It's what you're going to need in order to fulfill, get your Cyber Verify certification, get an MSP Verify report, get any of the other frameworks out there. You're going to be asked to do that. What you just showed the audience, Chris, is something that it's a tool that is free to use inside Cyber Verify for an MSP. And that is to take a customer of theirs through an assessment of a variety, in this case, security user training, and figure out, what do they actually do? Are they doing it themselves? Do they think we're doing it? Are they getting it from another vendor? I mean, it's really a useful tool if you've never taken a customer through that experience.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a good way of understanding their ecosystem and how to best manage it.
Yep. Okay. So to summarize, MSPs, whether you're certified, whether you're not certified, if you want to get there, you should be doing this. You should have some sort of either an LMS or a third-party, cybersecurity awareness training vendor who is delivering this type of service to you. It should be across all of your customers. True, Chris? Everybody should be using it internally?
Internally, yes.
Yeah, sorry, I said customers. All of your employees should be using it.
Well, hopefully customers too.
Yes.
Right.
Monetize it all day long. Yeah. Document the policy in a policy someplace in your library, and then monitor it and evidence it, not just for internal compliance, right, to the C-suite, to the necessary hierarchy of leadership that would need to see that type of reporting, and not the least of which is to show you and your team when they come to you and say, "Hey, I want to be certified." You're going to ask that question of them, and you're going to ask to see that same evidence. Yeah. Well, there you have a short snippet of how to become compliant, at least in terms of cybersecurity awareness and training. This is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so that's why we started off with this, because it's a good place to begin. Even if you're a brand new MSP, this is just kind of a baseline. Anyone should be able to do this. Anyone, even if you're a 3, 4, 5-person shop, you should be able to find a vendor, take this, internalize it, gain credit for it. It checks off a number. How many controls, Chris, do you think that this would check off just in the cyber awareness walkthrough we just talked about?
A good bit. You need it. You definitely need it to boost your cortex and to make sure that you're hitting the best practices within our framework. But a good percentage of the other frameworks too require it. So it's double digits.
And finally, if you are not an MSP that is focused entirely on security, let's say maybe you're doing other infrastructure work, you're doing maybe some very specialty work, everybody's is implicated in this. Everybody should be doing this, even if you're not in a security specialty field. Is that correct? There you have it. If you have questions, you want to dive into whether you're doing things the right way, you want to have MSP Alliance take a look at it, you want to start your journey towards certification with us, let us know, reach out. We're here to help. But regardless of what you're doing, start with these fundamentals, and you will at least be taking some internal steps towards dramatically improving your internal security. And if you sell it as a service, you're going to be helping your customers do the same thing. Stay safe. Until next time.